sorry that I'm late. I'm glad to see that you all got started without me. Now, where is Harvey? Where Harvey Dent, the man of the hour? Where's Rachel Dawes? She is my oldest friend. Come here.
Welcome, my friend. 13 years it's been, and yet here you stand before me as though it were only yesterday. I confess myself disappointed. Not one of you tried to find me.
Now, I am completely joking, guys. It's been, 2 months? I did miss you, though. I've been so busy. Life's been so hectic, but I'm back. I'm so ready to make some more videos, have some fun with you guys talking about these movies and shows. And we are here today to talk about Ahsoka again. And boy, is Ahsoka a divisive show. I mean, what isn't from Star Wars the last couple years? I've been on the negative and the positive side of these debates about these shows and stuff. There's been some I love that people hate, and some I hate that some people love, to each their own. But after finishing Ahsoka, I have to fall right down the middle on this one. I mean, I don't think this is a terrible show, but it's not a good show, This is the most average show I think I've ever watched in my life. It is, if it was a test, Ahsoka would be a 70 out of 100. It is absolutely, perfectly decent. But let's just get into all the stuff I really loved here, because there is a lot of good things here. Number one being the villains. I mean, the villains drag the show across the finish line. Baylan Skoll is easily the most interesting character here. He's acted perfectly, and what a loss to have that actor pass away. I mean, what a phenomenal last performance he gave. But even outside of the acting, the whole character design is just fantastic. I mean, the knight armor is amazing. His slow fighting style is great. It's so heavy, I mean, the fight with him and Ahsoka in Episode 3 is probably the only well-choreographed fight in the entire show. And even his apprentice grew on me, Shin Hati. They ended up having more chemistry than Ahsoka and Sabine have, even though Shin Bobby barely says anything. And even Thrawn's acting is just phenomenal, dude. I have some problems with the writing about it, but we'll get into that later. But the portrayal is fantastic. I mean, I know some people were mad because he's fat, but I really didn't care. I thought he killed it. And the other best thing this show does is the way it portrays the Empire after the original trilogy. That is how you do it the right way. That is infinitely more interesting than what the sequels did. I mean, this just proves to me you can keep the Empire around after Return of the Jedi and keep it unique, keep it not just more the same. Thrawn's garrison and the entire aesthetic of how run down and desperate they are, it makes them feel so much more dangerous and like a little cult almost. That's what I'm talking about. That is how you do the Empire. The First Order is so incredibly boring because their existence literally just erases all the progress made in the original trilogy, and the power balance is exactly the same almost immediately into the first movie. Thrawn as a villain of the sequels would have been so much better. It wouldn't have diminished Anakin, restoring balance by introducing outrageously powerful Sith, and it would have been great to see this guy that doesn't even have the Force, and with a crippled empire, it's all split into a bunch of organized factions and warlords, just absolutely give Luke and the New Republic a run for their money. Get a new cast of Jedi in, and have Thrawn just go to town. The storyline on paper of this show is so interesting. And though I'm really not a fan of the World Between Worlds as a concept at all, if they're gonna do it, this is a great direction to take it. It seems like they're leaning into Anakin filling the role of the father in relation to the Mortis gods, and it's such a fresh way to dive deeper into the Force. And if you're gonna explore the character of Anakin anymore, that's the best way to do it. And I think this show really just sets up a sequel season or a sequel movie pretty well. I'm super interested to see this stuff get explored more with Baylan and Shooby Dooby, and Ahsoka stranded out there and what they're gonna unearth about the Force within the ruins they found. That's all great stuff, and the problems I have with the show don't stop it from improving in the second season, which is pretty big for me. And again, just like I said in the first video, the overall aesthetic of the entire show is great. I mean, this and the villains are what really saves this show for me. Even Shia LaBeouf, who I really didn't like at all initially, started to develop a good rivalry with Sabine after the first 2 episodes. Baylan and Ahsoka were getting a good relationship going that was super interesting. The planets are all really unique, cool places. I love the whole concept of being in another galaxy, and I like how they tied it into the Dathomir witches too. They all look great. Just the visuals all around are fantastic, especially in the flashbacks in the World Between Worlds. That's all great stuff. And the last plus, before we get to the negatives, is obviously Hayden Christensen. I mean, he kills it as Anakin every single time he portrays him. And getting to see him in the Clone Wars armor and in the context of him as a master to Ahsoka, that was just the best form of fan service we could have gotten. I think it's implied that now he embodies both Vader and Anakin, which is a change I don't mind at all, and I think it might actually be an improvement to the character's already great redemption in Return of the Jedi. But that is definitely a concept that needs to be fleshed out more. I mean, when we got to Episode 3, I really thought that the last episode of the show would go back to the World Between Worlds and, like, explain literally any of it at all. But it's all extremely vague still. I know they do have room to do that in Season 2, though, but that was annoying. I mean, it felt like there was no closure on the Ahsoka Anakin stuff. But to really start laying it on thick for this show, I mean, the characters do not have chemistry. Like, there is some really wooden acting this entire show that just doesn't get better. I mean, I was kind of amazed at how poorly done the interactions between most of the hero characters were. I've always felt like the Rebels characters were never incredibly interesting in their own right, but what made Rebels endearing to me despite that was because of the close relationships they had, you know? But in Ahsoka, when Ezra and Sabine finally meet up, it feels wooden. There is like no emotion whatsoever. Ahsoka and Sabine, there's no chemistry there at all. When Ezra and Hera meet, again, after all this time, it should be so emotional. Hera was basically a mother to Ezra, and they haven't seen each other in years. Like, these interactions should be the best part of the show. A lot of people are defending the show, saying, like, well, people that don't like it clearly didn't watch Rebels, you know, they just don't understand the characters. It's like, I watched Rebels. This aspect of it is still bad. I mean, first off, while this show is a spiritual successor to Rebels, it's called Ahsoka. Second, even if it was called Rebels 2, a show has to be good on its own, you know? Even if you don't understand a lot of the plot, being a sequel or a spin-off of something else doesn't mean you don't have to write your characters in a way that makes them interesting. You know, it's not like, oh, we did the work in that show. They don't have to be charismatic here. I mean, like, look at a show like Better Call Saul, which I always reference because it's amazing. If, you know, Better Call Saul might be based on Breaking Bad, but if that show had gone even 5 episodes without justifying why you should care about what happens to Jimmy McGill, it would have failed. You know, you don't get to just say like, oh, well, you know who he is. He's from that show. I mean, someone who has never seen Breaking Bad could watch Better Call Saul and still enjoy it. You would still understand almost everything going on until very late into the series. You're rewarded with context for watching the original show, but it stands on its own 2 feet. In Game of Thrones, 10 minutes into the first episode, we can feel the close friendship and history between Ned and Robert, despite having seen nothing of them. You don't need to see Rebels to be able to feel the chemistry between the main characters. And as someone who has watched Rebels, I still didn't. They don't feel like the same characters. I also don't understand why they retconned Ezra having feelings for Sabine. I think that would have made it for a much more interesting dynamic than this brother-sister thing they're trying to do. This show has one of the most simple plots I have ever seen. It is very straightforward, man. Nobody, even if you didn't watch Rebels, you know, no one is confused about what's going on. That's not what the criticism is. A bad guy named Thrawn is coming back, we have to stop it. That is as straightforward as it is. And while we're talking about Ezra, man, I think they really missed a big opportunity here to make him feel like a unique kind of Jedi. I mean, being stranded on this planet for years without a lightsaber while constantly being hunted by the Empire, that's a great premise to make this character stand out. You know, why not make it so that at this point in his life, he no longer even needs a lightsaber, you know? He's so connected to the Force by this point that having a lightsaber would be more of a hindrance to him than a help. And that would justify giving him a big power level increase as well, and just make him different from Ahsoka and Sabine during the fight scenes. I just wish they would have put more emphasis on the fact that, like, being stranded out here for years alone would change him, you know? It could make him way more powerful in the Force because he's been doing nothing but basically meditating out here on his own, you know? It's like Yoda in isolation. But something else that I really disliked is that the character arcs here feel so thrown together and they have no depth to them whatsoever. I mean, I actually really enjoyed in the third episode when Sabine was actually given a moral dilemma after fighting Shindabi and made the wrong choice, picking Ezra over the fate of the galaxy. I was like, yes, finally, something that makes her interesting and like a real conflict that she can have with Ahsoka now. You know, I thought they were actually gonna give her a real character arc because of that. Like, she's gonna grow wiser and learn to make the hard choices, you know, and learn to follow her wiser master. But what I actually didn't account for is that it turns out she was just right about everything the whole time. Ahsoka should be more supportive. I mean, Jesus. Speaking of Ahsoka, I mean, the performance did grow on me a bit as the show went on, especially in relation to the first 2 episodes, which were super awkward, but she still lacks most of the personality that made the character interesting in the first place. And her character arc might as well not be there. I mean, it feels so last minute at the end of the show, and basically amounts to her being a better master, I guess, and then, you know, have faith that you're where you need to be. Regardless, it's just not very deep or emotionally satisfying at all, and seeing Anakin as a Force ghost smiling at her at the end felt like it was supposed to be way more significant than it actually was. She barely changed at all in the show, but they want to act like he's proud of all the progress she's made since they last spoke or something. It just falls super flat for me. In fact, the biggest problem I have with this entire show is that we still never really got a satisfying confrontation between Ahsoka and Anakin. Their interaction is good, and the Clone Wars flashbacks and all are great, but they really miss an opportunity to show some conflict there, you know? Does Ahsoka hate Anakin? Does she still feel guilty? How, you know, they never explore that. There's never a big argument. There's like a one-off line, and you missed out on all this emotional weight they could have thrown there. There's no apology. You don't know how Anakin feels about his time as Darth Vader, about his fall, about how it impacted Ahsoka. There's just nothing there. You know, it doesn't have to be a tit for tat of what happened at the end of Kenobi, you know, which was the best part of that show by far. Just give us some kind of closure on the relationship. Another thing this show really screws up is just the tension. It loses all momentum at the end of the show. The amount of times they get into a situation where they should be completely screwed because Thrawn outsmarted them is ridiculous. I wouldn't mind as long as the heroes escape through something clever, but there is no real reason that they should survive these things. I mean, in the finale, Thrawn is literally bombarding them on a flat plane as they ride up to his front door on wolves, and they're just fine. Ahsoka gets completely surrounded, but all the troopers just don't shoot her for some reason, and she's fine. Night Sister reanimates the dead, which should have been a really cool moment, it's scary, but they just kill them again like it's nothing. And the most annoying thing that happens in the whole show is when Thrawn's ship is absurdly far away, and Sabine, who has finally just barely managed to pull a lightsaber to her, flings Ezra onto it like she's Anakin Skywalker from the PlayStation 2 Revenge of the Sith video game. Why put this in? Just make the ship closer in the scene so it's not so freaking dumb. And again, one of the strengths of the show, which is the dynamic between Ahsoka and Baylan, and Sabine and Hobby Lobby, was one of the most interesting parts of the show. Why would you send them away right before the last episode? It's such a weird decision. That kills all the momentum going into the finale for me. You combine all this stuff with the pretty terrible choreography in every fight, and it really just makes this show seem so forgettable overall. I can't really see myself ever rewatching this other than the Anakin scenes, I guess. And it's crazy because, like, especially with the Dathomir Witch stuff, I thought that was so fresh and it was such a great idea, and they finally turned her into a Night Sister, and it was a great opportunity to do something unique and show how the Night Sisters are a big deal and they're different and they're scary. And basically what they do is they give her a sword. Like, the most unoriginal thing you could think of. But what's the point? You know, why even do this? Especially if you're not going to try the choreography at all, you know? Like, why even keep putting these lightsaber fights in if you're not going to put an effort into them? It's just frustrating, because this show is so close to being a really good show, and it just gets dragged down by all this sloppiness, you know? It's just the execution. It has great concepts, it has a great plot, but the characters just fail. I mean, Hera especially, oh my god. Hera's whole personality is reduced to being a general. I mean, every other line she has is about how she's a general. Like, we get it, okay? Give her something else to do. And I understand if no one else agrees with this, but I think they are really overdoing how stupid they're making the New Republic look. I mean, I get it. You need to install some flaws in it, show that they have issues, and that's what lets the First Order take over, because you have to, you know, connect it to that. And I mean, even in Legends, you know, they showed it had some flaws. But I think we get it now. Every single time they show the New Republic in one of these TV shows, they're just absolutely retarded. Like, just stop. We understand. Show them do something good for once. Show us that they're still better than the Empire, and that everything we've seen them do across Andor and the original trilogy and all this wasn't a complete waste of time. But even though I'm not the biggest fan of this show, I still want to support it, because, oh my god, it is so much better than the sequels. I mean, it's just a much better road path. Even though I don't think the execution was great, I would still much rather have this than any of that other stuff we got. You know, it has great villains, a great plot, and it has a good setup, you know? So, I mean, at this point, do we just need to lower our expectations, and that's all we should really expect from now on? But that is going to do it for this one. Should have some new stuff coming out pretty soon. I'm trying to get back on it. And I'll catch you all in the next episode of HeadCannon.